Welcome to Real Estate Real World, where we talk to the movers, shakers, and leaders that are getting it done right now in the real estate industry and beyond. Your host, Marguerite Crespillo, started this podcast simply dedicated to call people about what's really happening in this crazy roller coaster ride of real estate. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and stay up to date on the newest stuff by adding yourself to the list at www.realestaterealworld.com. Now your host, Marguerite Crespillo.
Well, hello, everybody. It's Marguerite, and I'm super excited to be here today as we get through the process of relaunching our podcast. We did this podcast for many years back in the day when originally we used to do it on free conference call, phone lines, and all kinds of fun stuff, but technology has come a long way. So I'm really excited to welcome my guest today, Coach Gabe. Coach Gabe is an expert in the Folsom area, an expert real estate agent in El Dorado Hills in Sacramento. He comes to real estate with a background in education, and he's going on his third year in the real estate business and is in his first year of practicing real estate full time. What's even more amazing is he's been involved in 25 transactions already. He's done referrals, land purchases, helped buy, sell luxury homes, helped first-time home buyers, and of course, our veterans. Prior to real estate, Coach Gabe taught for 15 years in the public school system and taught at the middle school and high school levels. Brave soul, my friend. Coach Gabe is also a business owner in El Dorado Hills. He's a co-owner of Minnie's House of Pain, a strength and conditioning facility in El Dorado Hills that's been serving the community for the past 20 years. Coach Gabe is married to his beautiful wife of 15 years, Sheena, and they have two children, Brooklyn, 12, Clayton, 10, and they also have two pugs, Gabby and Badger. Welcome to the show today, Gabe. How are you?
Outstanding. Thank you so much for bringing me on.
Good. Well, I'm so excited to have you here. You know, you and I have been blessed to become pretty good friends over the last year. I think mostly because of your epic mac and cheese.
True.
So just so y'all know, he showed up to a party last year around this time. I think it was in like November.
Yep, absolutely.
And brought this like ridiculous macaroni and cheese that is like some of the best mac and cheese I've ever had. And so I said, if he ever shows up at my house again, he's required to bring mac and cheese, and he has done it. So thank you. Where did you learn how to make that?
Just so I was kind of a nosy rosy kid and so I was that kid in the family that would kind of eavesdrop on adult conversations. And so I had a grandmother that was a phenomenal cook, and she kind of did everything with a phone attached to her ear. And so I was just like, I love my grandmother dearly, and just would hang around her. And my father is also a great cook. And so just hanging around grown-ups in the kitchen, and you learn by doing. You'd be in the kitchen and they'd be cooking, and they'd say, hey, hand me this, hand me that. And so being the nosy kid that I am, I didn't know I knew how to make it until I was asked to make it. And then I put it together, and then I actually got a follow-up lesson from my dad, and I got that one follow-up lesson, and I've been nails ever since.
Well, it's for sure the bomb diggity. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Like we talked about it in your bio, how you were a teacher, you were in the education system. So were you a athletic coach, or what did you do in middle school and high school?
So I was a super sub in the Folsom Cordova district. I literally graduated college on a Saturday. I'm sorry, yes, Saturday, drove home on Sunday, and I've been working at the gym ever since. But while working at the gym, we worked from 3:30 in the morning until 7 in the morning, and then from 4 in the evening until 7:30 in the evening. And so in the meantime, I would always go substitute teach. And so I ended up pursuing a teaching credential. And I worked in the Folsom. I started off in the Folsom Cordova district. So I started my student teaching at Folsom High School, and I started subbing in '04. Didn't get my credential until the spring of '08, and just kind of fast tracked there. And so at that time, when I initiated starting my teaching credential, they needed teachers, but by the time I actually got my teaching credential, the state was just in a hot mess, and they were, hiring and firing teachers left and right. And so the state kind of was in a different place with their budget at that time. And so that was the reason for me bouncing around. And so I think that has led me to having a network from every place that I've gone. So I have a single subject PE credential, and I also have a mild moderate special education credential. And so I've worked at a lot of different schools in a lot of different settings, and I feel like the soft skills that I've developed through teaching have have served me well as a realtor.
It's interesting that you say that because growing up, everyone asks, like, when you're a little kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I wanted to be a teacher, right?
Hmm.
But I was not very strong when it came to school subjects. I was more interested in the social aspect of school than learning what I needed to learn, right?
Yep.
I always laugh. I say my report cards always said talks too much, and it worked out for me. But the interesting thing is I wanted to be a teacher, and it's ironic that now, having been in real estate 29 years, I feel like my number one job is really teaching and educating the public on the process, right, of buying and selling a home. So how did you decide you wanted to get into real estate? Like, what took you from teaching? And like I said, God bless you for teaching middle school and high school. I'm not sure I would survive that. Those are some tough ages for kids, right? And all that they have to deal with these days. But what took you from that to selling real estate?
Well, I've always had an affinity, I feel like, for just looky-looing and just shopping real estate. I think that's always been fun. It's one of those things where, as a kid after church, my family moved from South Sac to Folsom in the early '90s, and after church, my mom would take us, and I couldn't even tell you where she took us, but I mean, we went from open house to open house, and oh my gosh, it's kind of like a traumatic childhood memory, but it's funny those little, like those, that the impression that had on me. So just there's a fixation for just seeing homes and new construction and that kind of thing. That's always been fun. But I think it was in, I want to say 2005, maybe 2004. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and
Oh,
Robert
great book.
Kiyosaki. Yeah, no, he talked about just how he got involved in real estate, and at that time he talked about foreclosures and just that kind of very. It was I found that very intriguing. And at that time, I was already pursuing a teaching credential. I had just met my wife. Life was happening at full speed for me, and I always had that desire since a young adult to pursue real estate, but never felt like I had the time. And so it wasn't until I turned 40 back in 2020 that I realized, like, well, it was a little bit before that. Um, you know, I was approaching 40 and realized, you know what, it's now or never, either, shit or get off the pot kind of thing. And I just really decided, you know what, I'm not, that won't be one of those things when I'm old and gray where I regret saying, man, I wonder what could have happened if,
Yeah.
I don't want to have that, and so that was, I know that's a kind of a long way of answering your question, but that's my answer.
No, I think that it's really interesting because during that time, so I was full blown in the real estate market during that time in 2005. And I remember clearly when the market shifted, right? Like I
Mhm.
remember August of 2005 when I put a house on the market, and 2 weeks later we had no showings.
Mm,
And I remember thinking, huh, that's really weird. Like maybe the winds have changed or something. Obviously, in hindsight, I had no idea what was to come. But I remember that happening. And what's interesting is with this current market, we're now doing this interview in 2022. I remember that it was Mother's Day weekend of this year
mm,
when things dramatically changed and shifted. Now, that's no indication that we're going to be following the same path that we did in 2005 and 6, but it was interesting because it was really kind of like a light bulb moment, looking back, that none of us knew what was going to happen. But Rich Dad Poor Dad is one of my favorite books, Robert Kiyosaki. And he
absolutely.
actually, somebody sent me a video that I don't know how accurate this is or not, but that he is predicting either a civil war or a major depression.
Yeah,
And
he's
so I want to believe that that's not going to happen either way, right? But what
yeah,
I do know is that in any kind of market, people still have to buy and sell homes.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's I still follow Robert Kiyosaki, and he's he's been right about a lot of things, and I think we highlight, when the pundits start talking, we highlight what they've been accurate about, not necessarily what they missed on.
Exactly, exactly. So, so tell me this. So you've now been in real estate 3 years, and just 1 year ago, you decided to do it full time. So you
Yep.
still work at Minnie's House of Pain because I get your text messages to remind me to get
Yes.
my butt on the treadmill, which I don't always pay attention to. But the funny thing is that you're now full time in real estate. And how's that been going for you?
It's going great. What's funny, as an educator, your life is very scripted and regimented, and it's very routine, and so it's amazing what you get used to, especially working in the secondary schools where, you have first period, second period, third period, lunch, back to class, and it's very, your day is very scripted, and so that is not the life of an agent. I mean, there's no one getting you up, there's no one telling you what to do. And I think I spent the first 4 to 6 months, and I know this sounds like a long time, but just really trying to identify what you should be doing, what are best practices, what's going to help you generate business. And there's so many different things that you can be doing. There's so many different ways to generate business as a realtor. So to answer your question, it's going great. I have to stop, take a look back, and see what I've accomplished over the past year to really appreciate the success that I have had. Because right now, I kind of live my life with this sense of urgency, and it's hard to appreciate, the successes and the good things and the good habits that I have in place now.
Well, what's funny is you and I were talking about this one day, how relatable it is really to diet and exercise too, right? Exercise. Like
Absolutely.
we all want that like easy button where it like, melts off all the fat and we have the six pack abs overnight. But that requires habits, right? It requires
Absolutely.
consistency and a daily routine that you have to follow. And so how have you adjusted or adapted to that? How have you taken some of that skill that you've had in, your gym to what you're doing now in real estate?
Well, I'll answer that in a couple of ways. And the first way, and just being a coach, from a strength and conditioning perspective, and being a coach, just working with different kids in different sports through basketball and football and all the other, softball, the other sports that I've coached throughout the year. I feel like you live by certain principles, and just, I think philosophies change. I think principles don't. So as far as things like being on time, being strong with your word, being, there's so many different things that relate to being a great agent. And I think the first thing is establishing a routine. I think definitely being on the phone, being a nosy Rosie as a kid has been helpful. And it's one of those things where, I like to work my sphere of influence. I feel like a lot of my production has come from my sphere of influence. And what they don't tell you as an agent is that it might not be the person you're calling that is the direct result of your business, but it could be the person that someone in your sphere is talking to. You want to be top of mind when it comes to people. I mean, I've never been, I mean, my kids play sports. And so sometimes I coach them, sometimes I don't. And so I'm at an age where I go to a lot of kid parties. And so it never fails. The topic of real estate comes up. And oh, by golly, I'm the local realtor in the room. And so some people turn off and they kind of turn their back on that conversation, but a lot of people lean into that conversation. And so to be able to talk about what people are hearing versus the experience that you have in the field, again, helps magnify you as a local expert, and really adds some street credibility to who you are. And it helps people see you as the local professional and the local expert. I think, I don't know if I answered your question, but
Well, yes and no. So I guess my question is it what kind of habits have you created for yourself to create more of that consistency that you talk about when you are training, like, physically training. Because what you indicated earlier was one of the challenges you saw is going from this structure in the school environment to now this kind of like free willy, like, work when you want kind of mentality. How have you, and you said that's kind of what you did in the first few months. So how have you changed that? And like, what does your schedule look like now?
Sure. Well, definitely. Again, trying to establish a schedule, and so obviously being at a school, you show up to school. Obviously, you have to have a certain level of preparation, from a teaching perspective, and so I try to take that same concept and apply it to real estate, if that makes sense. So I try to show up at the office at a certain time, so either 8:30 or 9 o'clock. I try to get there at 8:30 because my kids, I have one kid that needs to be at school around 8 and another one that needs to be at her school around 8:30. So if I end up having to take my daughter to school who has to arrive to school later, then I show up to work around 9 o'clock. And so obviously establishing a start time, that's the first thing, and what to do within that first 2 or 3 hours at work. So if that's checking emails, if that's following up on calls or leads, and then checking in with your sphere, trying to contact 10 folks a day. Definitely, these are 10 conversations a day. um, Generating things on social media. I mean, that could be birthday shout outs. We took a course through a guy named Sean Kokoska,
Yeah.
and he has a great, I mean, phenomenal to-do sheet, to-do list of what to do every day. And so that's 10 calls and 25 social media interactions. And so that could be direct messaging folks, and that could be on whatever platform you choose, if that's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I was told by I'll say a younger agent, that only old people use Facebook, and I said, "What?" I had
Like,
a
wait, what's that age requirement? What is
yeah,
that?
yeah, because in my mind, I'm not old, but apparently, the innuendo they shared with me, apparently I'm old, but
Oh
um,
yeah, my boys are like, they don't go on Facebook at all. They're
yeah.
Instagram now. They're not even really TikTok. It's interesting what, the generation is.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about that is, when I told those young people that, I've gotten, 3 to 5 leads that I've closed on from Facebook, they kind of, started generating Facebook accounts. So,
They started
um,
looking at things a little differently.
yeah, yeah, they had a change of heart. So just establishing those routines and trying to be consistent. I think that the most difficult thing is, there are things, there are principles, there are tasks that you try to accomplish when you don't have business. But when you do have business and you start having to attend inspections and appointments and different things, that can be difficult. It's difficult when you have business to kind of stay in touch with your routine.
So tell me this, what has been, I'm going to ask this question in two ways. So we'll ask at the first one. So what has been your favorite part of real estate? And then I want you to follow up with that. What's been your most challenging part of real estate?
Okay. The time freedom can be the most challenging part of real estate. I know when I work from home sometimes, and my wife works from home as well. My wife is a legal bill reviewer for Allstate Insurance. And so she got to work from home before it was cool to work from home. And so, she has a routine that she has established. And so when I'm home, if I'm working from home, she may not respect the routine that I have established. And so she may ask me to do certain things or run certain errands as if, you know, I'm not working. So so that's been the gift and the curse. It's been great to be able to drop my kids off at school and to pick my kids up from school, and to be able to play a support role. It eliminates a level of stress that we've had in our family, because my parents are aging. My wife's parents, they live locally, but they're about 45 minutes away, and they're aging as well. So it's hard to balance that. So if I can just bridge the gap and be supportive at home, I really try to do that.
Well, they call us now kind of like this sandwich generation, right? Where we have children at home and, parents we're dealing with as well. And I know that when I was raising my kids are all grown now, but when I was raising my kids, I had my grandparents living in our guest house. And I
Mm,
remember, trying to run grandparents back and forth to medical appointments, getting my kids back and forth to school. And I also felt very blessed that, both myself and my husband, Joe, had the flexibility of real estate where we could be there when we needed to. I think, if there was any blessing that came out of COVID, the ability to work from home has really helped people in a lot of ways, in positive ways. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So what do you see for yourself in the future? Like where do you see yourself a year from now when it comes to real estate? What are you hoping to accomplish and how do you see your business differently?
Well, I'd like to obviously improve on my production. There's certain tasks that I want to do. I'd love to build out a team. I've been working on trying to attract agents. I have a couple that I'm talking to and working on at this time. It's there are levels. There are levels to real estate. I obviously want to attend their EXP does a great job of providing professional development opportunities throughout the year. They have great events, at different locations across the country. I would love to start attending some of those events with my wife. I think some people and sometimes even and spouses may have a tendency to think that real estate is kind of like selling sunset, and we just pull up, open the house, and maybe people want to make an offer, maybe not. And I don't think they understand, the sacrifices that agents make. We are definitely problem solvers, and I think, if you have a spouse that's not in the real estate business, and all they hear on the news is that rates are this, rates are that, and the market's going to crash. I think it's hard to combat that all the time. So higher production in my business. That's definitely a top goal. Building out a team is another goal, and just to continue to grow professionally. That's another goal. My kids are heavily involved in what I do. If a lot of times I call myself Coach Gabe. I mean, I can't tell you how many times um, my son has gone with me on showings. Um, in a uniform, like on the way to a game, we may have to, where we may have to leave the house at a certain time, and I might get an opportunity to show something on the way to taking him to a game. Then come on, son, we got a boogie. And so he knows the deal, and he actually has tried to show people homes like himself, like, hey, this is the kitchen. And, he's like, get out of the way. um,
Hey, you can use your kids. I know one of our agents, Alicia, had her daughter Lily who's only 3 in a video she was doing, and it's just adorable. I
yeah,
mean, that is the beauty of real estate, is it, if possible, you can bring your kids. Now, not always does it make sense, right? But
yep,
in some situations, and depending on the client's level of comfort, it's completely, okay to involve your kids somehow. I know my kids grew up in the real estate industry. And what's funny, and now that they're grown, I asked them, I go, so what was it like growing up with a real estate mom? They're like, well, we didn't know any different. you know, so,
yep, yep,
they just grew up in this world. So, it was
yep.
funny too. I was thinking yesterday, I saw somebody post on Facebook, a person, not a real estate agent, who is selling her home. And she said, selling your home is not for the faint of heart. And I
Yep.
thought that was so interesting because I think that it directly is impacted by the agent that you choose, right? And people, like you were saying earlier, I think that a lot of clients don't necessarily give us as much credit until they do, meaning that once they've actually gone through a real estate experience with an agent who maybe is not to the level that they should be, then they start to appreciate, the quality of better agents as they go.
Absolutely. We are not all created equally. And sometimes people, they have to find that out for themselves, you
Yes, they
know.
do. Yes, they do. Well, as we wrap up today, what is one piece of advice you would give for somebody who is listening right now and maybe thinking of getting their real estate license, or maybe somebody who's struggling to figure it out?
I would try to get that agent to identify their superpower. I think we all have superpowers as agents. I think mine is connecting with people. It would take me 2 minutes or less to figure out a way to connect with someone. So that's my superpower. Some people might be uh, very analytical, and they might be able to say, hey, you're looking for this, you can only afford that. And someone may take that information and be able to really present it to a seller or buyer in a way that makes sense to them. And it just helps them, so everybody has something that they're an expert in. I think it's important for every individual agent to figure out what their secret superpower is and lean into it. I came up with the Coach Gabe thing, and I can't even say I came up with it. There was a gentleman that used to be on a team that I used to be on. His name is Steve Gonzalez. And I was just venting to Steve. And I said, man, everybody sees me as Coach Gabe, like I need people to see me as Gabe the realtor. And he was like, bro, you're Coach Gabe the realtor. He's like, lean into that, man. And so, that hit me like, it just slapped me in the face. And he's like, you're coaching people through real estate. And I said, man, isn't that the truth? And so, just in hindsight, looking at all of the people I've coached and all of the teams that I've coached and will continue to coach in the future, it just made sense for me to lean into Coach Gabe. And people know me as being a hard worker, and people know me as someone as a bit of a connector. If there's something I don't know, I know someone that does know, and have always been able to bridge that gap for people. And so,
well, I'll tell you, it's been a true pleasure getting to know you over this last year or so, and spending some time with you. And I'm really excited for your future and for the possibilities of what you have coming. I think you're an extraordinary human, and I'm honored to be your friend.
well,
And I'm definitely looking forward to some more of that mac and cheese. So.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm honored to know you. It's so funny how we met, because you were kind of like the Wizard of Oz to me. I'd always heard about Marguerite, and as someone who I think I know everyone, right? Or if I know someone that knows everyone, and so when I met you, and I was like, hold on, you're Marguerite, like that Marguerite, and I like grabbed your hand, I didn't kiss your hand, So it's been great knowing you, and I appreciate your mentorship. I appreciate your friendship, and I appreciate your leadership. So I thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on our show today, on our podcast. I know I got to be on your podcast a while back. What's the name of your podcast again?
Real Estate Trends with Coach Gabe.
Yes. So we'll make sure to post a link here on this as well, so people can access your podcast as well. And we're so honored that you're here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I'm honored.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on Real Estate Real World. And you can follow us on, iTunes, YouTube, all those places. So check them all out. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for joining us today on Real Estate Real World, where we talk with masters and leaders in real estate and beyond on how we can raise the bar in our industry. Please subscribe over on iTunes. And while you're there, be sure to give us a review. Your reviews encourage us and help others find our podcast. For show notes and hot topics on what's going on right now in our real estate industry, hop on over to www.realestaterealworld.com and add your name to our email. Thanks again for listening. And go out there, be a part of the elite masterclass in raising the bar on the real estate industry.